You know how sometimes life doesn't fall apart with a crash, but with a whisper? That's exactly how it started for me. It was a Sunday, the kind of quiet morning I usually looked forward to: coffee, the paper, a little yard work if I was feeling ambitious. I'd just come back from a quick trip to the hardware store, new caulk gun, nothing fancy, and I walked in through the back door without a sound. Habit, I guess. Years of trying not to wake the kids or spook the dog. And that's when I heard it. My wife's voice. Calm, low, and too casual. He doesn't need to know he isn't your real dad until you're done with college. He'll take care of us. Just like that. A sentence so sharp it cut right through me. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. I stood there frozen, one boot still halfway off, heart doing this weird thump like it couldn't decide if it should break or explode. I peeked around the corner, and there she was. Sitting at the table with the kids, our kids, I thought, like she was just explaining how taxes worked or what time dinner would be. She didn't see me. And in that moment, I didn't say a word. I just backed out the door and stood in the garage, staring at the rake like it had the answers. That was the moment everything shifted. Years of bedtime stories, soccer games, late-night fevers, school projects. Turns out I was just the guy footing the bill. The placeholder. The warm body with a wallet. But I didn't scream. Didn't make a scene. I went inside, nodded like nothing was wrong, and said I needed to run an errand. I already knew. I wasn't coming back. I always thought if something like this ever happened, if my whole life flipped upside down, I'd be the guy yelling in the driveway, maybe throwing a lamp. Turns out I'm not. I'm the quiet type. Dangerous type, I guess. I didn't even go back for lunch. Drove straight to a storage unit I hadn't used in years. Tossed the caulk gun in the back seat and sat there, engine running, just thinking. I wasn't grieving. Not yet. It was more like I'd been unplugged from my own life, and now I was watching it play out like some bad TV drama where the dad's the last to know. Except this time, I was the dad. By the next morning, I had a plan. I packed what mattered: documents, some clothes, a couple of photos I still cared about. I left the wedding album. Left the family portraits hanging in the hallway like ghosts with forced smiles. The last thing I did was disable the shared bank card. Not in a fit of anger, just cold logic. If I was just the guy paying for college, then the free ride was officially over. Then I vanished. No dramatic exit. Just walked out like I was going to work. Never went back. I stayed with an old buddy from high school for a couple nights. Guy owed me one from way back. When he saw my face and didn't ask questions, I knew I'd picked the right friend. While I sipped cheap beer on his porch, I called my lawyer. I need to evict someone from my house, I said. And I need to talk about paternity fraud. He paused, then just said, all right, let's get to work. Now, I'm not the type to cry in front of my lawyer, but I'll be honest, when I laid it all out for him, even he looked like he needed a minute. Guy's been practicing family law for over 20 years. Said he'd seen a lot. But this is one of those pour a drink before we file kinds of cases, he said. I told him everything, what I overheard, how I knew the kids weren't mine, in the quiet way I left. No confrontation, no fireworks. Just clean exit, full retreat. He nodded, scribbling notes like a man taking inventory before war. First step, he said, we confirm what you already suspect. Paternity tests. That hit harder than I expected. I've been calling them my kids for over a decade. Birthday cakes, scraped knees, dance recitals, science fairs. Turns out biology can undo all of that in a single court order. He told me to stay away from the house. Said if I went back, I could end up looking like the aggressor. And since we were playing chess now, not checkers, every move mattered. We filed for temporary eviction on the grounds of betrayal, financial deceit, and, well, the fact that I owned the place. Every brick, every square inch. Paid off the mortgage myself over the years while she managed the household. A week later, she was served. I didn't see her face when the papers landed in her hand, but I hope she choked on her morning smoothie. Because I wasn't the backup plan anymore. I was the storm coming. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the paternity tests to come back. 14 days of waiting. 14 days of waking up wondering if maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. Maybe I misheard. Maybe there was some insane explanation and this was all going to blow over. But deep down, I already knew. You don't forget a line like, he doesn't need to know he isn't your real dad. My lawyer called me in. He didn't say anything over the phone, just told me to come in and to sit down when I got there. I knew what that meant. He slid the envelope across the desk like it was radioactive. Both kids. Not mine. 0% probability. Not even close. It felt weird, like the floor gave out from under me, but I didn't fall. I just floated there, numb. See, I'd already grieved the woman I thought I married. That grief came when I packed my bag. But this was different. This was watching the family I thought I built dissolve like sugar in hot water. These results, my lawyer said carefully, they opened the door for a paternity fraud lawsuit. You'd be within your rights to pursue damages. I just nodded. He leaned back in his chair, watching me closely. What do you want to do, Ethan? That was the first time I'd heard my name out loud in days. It sounded foreign. I want it on record, I said. I want the truth documented. I want her to explain it to a judge, under oath. I want every lie she told me, every "I love you," every "he's just like you" to be part of the public record. He nodded. Then let's make it official. She called me the moment she got served the lawsuit. Not a text. Not an email. A full-on phone call, which, for someone who used to barely glance up from her tablet when I walked in the room, was already telling. I let it ring twice before I answered. What is this, Ethan? She snapped. Paternity fraud? Are you serious right now? No hello. No explanation. Straight to damage control. Dead serious, I said, calm as a lake. You had your secrets. Now I've got mine. Mine just come with lawyers. Her voice cracked a bit, trying to rally some of that old control she used to have over me. You're being ridiculous. I didn't think it mattered. You didn't think it mattered that I wasn't their father? There was silence on the other end. And not the kind where someone's gathering their thoughts. The kind where someone realizes the game's over, and they're the last one to figure it out. I didn't want to ruin everything, she said finally. I knew you'd leave if you found out. You're damn right I did. She tried to pivot, of course. Said the kids loved me. Said I'd been a great father figure. Said it didn't change the memories. That was the moment I realized something. She wasn't upset because she hurt me. She was upset because I stopped playing along. She wanted me to keep pretending. To keep being the ATM with a heart. But now that the house wasn't hers, the money wasn't hers, and the lie was on paper with a court stamp, panic set in. You made this choice, I said. I just decided not to be part of it anymore. Then I hung up. For the first time in weeks, I slept like a rock. I always figured if I had to break something tough to the kids one day, it'd be about the dog or maybe a tough life lesson. Never imagined it'd be about me. But the truth was already out there. The legal stuff was moving forward. And if there's one thing I learned growing up without much, it's that kids deserve honesty, even when it hurts. So I asked to meet with them. Neutral ground. My sister's place. She offered snacks and awkward smiles before slipping out the back door so we could talk. They were nervous. Teenagers. Smart enough to know something big was going on, but still hoping maybe it was just mom and dad are separating type stuff. Not nuclear meltdown. I didn't waste time. I overheard your mom talking a few weeks ago, I said. She told someone that I wasn't your real dad. They froze. My oldest, the one who always wore headphones like armor, pulled them down and stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. That true? He asked. I nodded. We did paternity tests. Confirmed it. My youngest, still soft around the edges, looked confused. But you raised us. I did, I said. Because I thought you were mine. And because I loved being your dad. That part was always real. But your mom made choices I didn't know about. And I can't keep living a lie. They didn't cry. Not then. They just sat there, processing. Probably replaying birthdays, holidays, every memory I'd been part of, trying to make sense of it. Then the oldest finally said, "You still feel like dad." That one got me. I took a breath. I'm not going to badmouth your mom. That's not my job. But I am going to take care of myself now. I can't keep pretending nothing happened. They left that night with a lot on their shoulders. But at least they knew the truth. At least they knew I hadn't lied to them. You'd think after the whole "not your real kids" reveal, there wouldn't be much else left to discover. Turns out, I was just scratching the surface. See, when I left the house, I didn't take much. Didn't want to give her a chance to say I'd stolen anything. But after the court filing, my lawyer advised me to swing by with an officer present to collect a few personal items, just in case. So I did. She wasn't there. That was the arrangement. The cop stood by the door while I boxed up my old laptop, a few books, and some paperwork from my home office. That's when I noticed it. Her old filing cabinet. Bottom drawer, jammed like it hadn't been opened in years. I gave it a tug, and out came a folder labeled Medical, Personal. Curiosity 1. Inside, copies of paternity tests. Dated from years ago, long before I knew anything. One for each kid. Same result. She knew. Not just suspected, knew. And had the paperwork to prove it. She just never told me. That wasn't a mistake. That was strategy. It was calculated. She let me raise them, pay for them, love them, and she knew. Next page. Financial statements. Credit card bills to stores I'd never heard of. Spa retreats. Jewelry. A boutique hotel, billed regularly, under her name. I stood there holding a decade's worth of deception in my hands. A ledger of how deep the rabbit hole really went. You good? The officer asked, watching me closely. Yeah, I said, just packing up the last of my illusions. I boxed it all up and walked out without a word. Because now I knew, I hadn't just lost a family. I'd escaped a con. I didn't think she'd stay quiet for long. And I was right. 3 days after the court filings went public, my phone started buzzing with messages. Not from her. No, she was smarter than that. From mutual friends. Her coworkers. Even her cousin Tina, who always seemed to have a glass of Chardonnay and the latest gossip ready. Apparently, she'd launched a full-blown PR campaign. She's telling people you abandoned your family, one message read. She said you're having a midlife crisis, said another. The real kicker? One old friend texted me. Man, she's saying you knew the kids weren't yours and agreed to raise them anyway. That this lawsuit is just about money. I nearly laughed. It was so absurd it circled back around to impressive. She wasn't just rewriting history. She was publishing the sequel. She underestimated one thing, though. Receipts. See, I'd kept every message since this started. Every recording, every file, every medical result, every word from her own mouth. I wasn't trying to shame her publicly, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let her rewrite me out of my own life like I was just some extra in her personal soap opera. So I called one friend. A good one. The kind who listens more than he talks. I laid it all out. The conversation? It got around. Fast. Turns out, people love a dramatic story, but they really love the one with proof. Within a week, the tide shifted. The same folks who were raising their eyebrows started texting me things like, "Man, I'm sorry. I didn't know the full story. I always thought something was off with her. If you need anything, I got your back." And just like that, her campaign hit a wall. Because a lie can travel fast. But truth? Truth shows up with documentation. It was a rainy Tuesday, figures, and the courthouse smelled like old paper and nerves. I wore my best suit. Not for her. For me. If I was going to sit across from a woman who once promised me forever and now swore I was overreacting, I was going to do it with my head high and my tie straight. She walked in looking polished. Like she was headed to brunch, not a courtroom. Designer heels, subtle makeup, same charm she used to win over waiters, neighbors, and PDA moms. Didn't work on the judge. Now, this wasn't some drawn-out, dramatic courtroom drama. No yelling or banging gavels. It was clean, clinical, and just the right amount of awkward. She tried to play the victim. Said I was emotionally distant in the marriage. That I must have known. That I wasn't really the father, but I'd acted like one, so what was the harm? That's when my lawyer slid the old paternity tests across the table. The ones she'd hidden in the cabinet. Judge raised an eyebrow, so high I thought it might leave orbit. You had knowledge of the children's biological parentage and withheld it from your husband, he said slowly. And you continued to allow him to believe they were his. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her attorney tried to pivot, talked about emotions, love, the meaning of fatherhood, all the usual stuff you throw when the facts aren't on your side. But the judge didn't bite. This isn't a philosophical debate, he said. This is a legal case involving deception, financial responsibility, and long-term fraud. Mr. Sterling has grounds to proceed. She finally looked at me then. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. With fear. Because she finally realized something I had learned the hard way. The man she lied to for years, the one she thought would keep shouldering the burden, quietly, was gone. The man sitting across from her now? He wasn't playing along anymore. You know what they don't tell you about betrayal? It's expensive. Not just emotionally. I'm talking credit lines, savings accounts, backdoor loans, and mysterious Venmo transfers that make you feel like a chump with a checkbook. After the court hearing, we moved into discovery. Basically, the financial version of flipping every stone and checking for snakes. And oh boy, were there snakes. Turns out, while I was working overtime, cutting corners, and fixing leaky faucets myself to save a buck, she was living in an entirely different economy. My lawyer found a wellness retreat in Sedona that cost more than our last family vacation. jewelry purchases that somehow never made it into my sightline, a business consulting fee that went to a guy she used to date in college, because nothing says financial responsibility like paying your ex $800 a month. And my personal favorite? A secret savings account in her name only, funded by money I earned. The house was mine. Bought it before the marriage. Paid it off with union sweat and early morning shifts. She tried to stake a claim, but the prenup, something her own parents had insisted on, shut that door quick. My lawyer presented it all like a surgeon with a scalpel, clean, cold, precise. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. The judge didn't yell. He just nodded, looked over the documentation, and said, "It appears Mrs. Sterling benefited significantly from this deception. Mr. Sterling is well within his rights to seek restitution." That word, restitution, felt like a win. Not because I wanted revenge, but because for the first time in months, someone in a position of authority looked at the facts and said, "Yeah, this isn't okay." Afterward, outside the courtroom, she tried to talk to me. Said we could figure something out without dragging it all through court. I just looked at her. "You figured things out without me for over a decade," I said. "Why stop now? It was bound to happen sooner or later." Small town, shared history, and now a shared courtroom file. I finally met him, the guy who, biologically speaking, was the kid's father. Let me just say, you build up these people in your mind. Imagine some tall, smooth-talking, silver fox type. A guy who looks like he just stepped out of a magazine ad for cologne and deception. Nope. He was average. Jeans a little too tight, hairline holding on by a thread, and that vibe of someone who peaked during high school football, but still talks about the big game, like it was yesterday. I ran into him in the parking lot of the courthouse. "Ethan, right?" he said, stepping forward like we were meeting at a backyard barbecue. I figured we'd cross paths eventually. I didn't say anything right away, just studied him. This was the man who took something from me without even knowing it, and left me holding the bill. He scratched the back of his neck. "Look, I didn't know she told you the kids were yours. I thought you were out of the picture when it all happened." "I swear, man." "Yeah," I said, folding my arms. "And when you saw pictures of them growing up, or heard they had a dad, that didn't ring any bells." He looked away, then shrugged. I didn't want to stir the pot. I figured. Figured what? I cut in. That I'd keep raising them, paying for everything, while you lived your life without consequences. He opened his mouth like he wanted to explain it all away, but nothing came out. He just stood there. I leaned in, not angry, just tired. "Let me give you some free advice. From one man to another. You don't get to decide when you show up. Not with kids. Not with real life. You either show up from day one, or you live with what you didn't do." And then I left him there, standing in the parking lot, hands in his pockets, staring at the pavement like maybe it had the answers. He didn't follow me. Didn't say anything else. A week after that run-in in the courthouse parking lot, I got a knock on my door. Not a text. Not a call. A literal knock. That's rare these days, and it usually means someone's selling solar panels or religion. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a stranger. It was my oldest. He stood there, hands in his hoodie pocket, that same stubborn look I used to see when he didn't want to do his homework. Except this time, it was different. He wasn't just defiant, he was heavy, like something had been sitting on his chest too long, and he'd finally decided to let it out. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside without a word. We sat in silence for a while. He didn't take his hoodie off, didn't touch the soda I offered him, just stared at the floor like it had betrayed him, too. Then, finally, he said it. "I'm sorry." I looked at him. "For what?" "For not knowing. For not asking. For not noticing how much you were doing. I always thought you were just supposed to be there. That it was normal." Man, that one hit harder than any court ruling. I didn't cry, but my throat sure tried. "You were a kid," I said. "It wasn't your job to notice." "Still," he said, blinking fast. "You were always there. And she let you carry it alone." I'm angry. At her. At everything. I leaned back and nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too." That was it. No big hug. No cheesy music swelling in the background. Just a quiet understanding between a man and a young adult trying to find the truth in a mess someone else made. When he left, he turned back on the porch and said, "You'll always be my dad. No test changes that." That one stayed with me. Longer than the pain. Longer than the betrayal. Longer than the anger. Because out of all the lies, that moment was real. There's this moment after a storm when everything's still soaked, but the sky's starting to clear. That's where I found myself. The legal mess? Almost wrapped. The court acknowledged the fraud, ruled in my favor financially, and most importantly, my name was no longer legally bound to the lie. I wasn't dad on paper anymore, but I'd earned something else. Something better. A clean slate. So I moved. Not far, just enough to breathe again. Found a fixer-upper with a little land and a leaky roof. Most people saw the flaws. I saw a project. Something honest. You'd be amazed what painting a wall does for a man's spirit. I started waking up before the alarm. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. Morning coffee on the porch. Tools in hand by 8. No drama. No secrets. Just me, a dog I adopted from the shelter, and the satisfaction of patching up the holes. One nail, one board, one honest day's work at a time. And slowly, the guilt faded. The shame. That twisted feeling like I'd failed at something. Truth is, I didn't fail. I got lied to. I got used. And then, I got out. I even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'll tell you what. It's amazing what happens when you meet someone and there's no script. No act. Just two people, showing up exactly as they are. One evening, I got a message from the younger one, the quiet kid. A picture of a drawing she'd done. Said she missed building birdhouses with me. That she still had the one we made together. I smiled. Sometimes we don't get to choose how things begin, but we sure as hell get a say in how they end. It came on a Wednesday. Funny how something so small can rattle your whole morning. I was halfway through installing a new window frame when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. I've gotten pretty good at avoiding the past. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. One message. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never stopped loving you. Claire. I stood there, phone in one hand, screwdriver in the other, staring at a sentence that might have shattered me 6 months ago. But now, it just felt hollow. Forgiveness? It's not that I hadn't thought about it. I had. A lot. But not in the way she meant. She wanted relief. A cleared conscience. A way to tuck the whole thing into a neat box labeled regret. But I didn't know her that. I owed myself peace. And I already had it. So I didn't write back. Not out of spite. Just finality. Some things don't need a response. They need distance. They need time. They need the silence that says, I've moved on. I deleted the message. Then I stepped back, looked at the new window frame I was building, and smiled. It fit perfectly. No gaps. No drafts. Strong. Clean. Secure. Kind of like me now.